Welcome to Indie Thinker with Reed Huberman. You're about to make the jump from the dishonest mainstream media into free and independent thought from key thought leaders on the subjects of culture, causes, politics, and faith. Hey, thanks so much for taking the time to join us today for this episode of Indie Thinker with Reed Huberman. Today, our guest is Bill Farrel. Now, you may know him because he is the best-selling author of the book, Men Are Like Waffles and Women Are Like Spaghetti. And he's invested years of his life to studying gender differences and how it impacts marriage. So after I recorded this episode, I told my wife this might be one of the best conversations we've had yet on Indie Thinker. So I'm really excited about sharing it with you guys. And now we did this episode about 2 weeks back, and there could not be a better time to release this episode than right now because states like Tennessee are beginning to grapple with the Biden administration's radical agenda to violate the private space and sports of young women especially. And there are people who will deem these moves to protect young women as anti-transgender. And for this reason, it's important that we stay informed. We cannot afford to duck behind these issues with platitudes, or if you're a Christian, avoid them with religious jargon, when we know that the best kind of world is the one that follows biblical truth. If we're going to make a difference, it has to start with discussions like the one I have with Bill today. And he really gives some great, helpful advice on how you can have these conversations, especially if you're a parent and you want to talk with your kids. So make sure you stick around for the end because he shares some great advice. So I want to make sure that you hear that. Now, before we jump into the episode, please, I want to ask you to do us a big favor. I'm just starting this podcast out, and I really need your help to get the word out. Plus, I really believe we're creating some great content that needs to get into the hands of other people. So not only will you be helping us, but you'll be helping other people experience some great content and hopefully make a difference in the world if you would be willing to help rate this on Apple, share it with others, and even subscribe to this podcast wherever you may be listening to it. Well, without further ado, I want to jump right into the episode. So thanks so much for joining us. I hope you enjoy it. Welcome to Indie Thinker with Reed Huberman. I am super excited about my guest today, Bill Farrel. Bill, thanks for being on the show today.
Great to be with you, Reed.
Absolutely. So let me give just a brief introduction so that when we'll set the premise for our conversation today, just kind of let people know your background for those that don't know it, and then kind of what your expertise is and stuff as we comment on stuff today. So Bill Farrel is an international speaker, relationship expert, and author of over 35 books, including the best-selling Men Are Like Waffles, Women Are Like Spaghetti, a book that sold over 300,000 copies. Now, I looked that up last night. Is that right? Or how many? It's got to be over that, right?
Yeah, it's pushing 500,000 now.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
So he has experienced has experience as a senior pastor, youth pastor, and a pastor for small groups on the team of Dr. David Jeremiah. He and his wife Pam have co-hosted radio programs as well as co-authored numerous books to encourage and enhance interpersonal relationships. Last I saw, your newest book was 10 Best Decisions a Leader Can Make. So is that true? And you got anything else in the works?
Well, we've actually kept going. Our newest book is called Marriage Meetups.
Okay.
And it is
I haven't seen that one.
Yeah, it's a guided book for couples to stay on the same page.
Okay.
Because one of the things we discovered in relationships is our emotions always follow our decisions. So a couple who's good at decision making, they tend to like each other better and they have a better emotional atmosphere in their home.
Yeah. But
it looks like work, so they avoid it.
So you're saying that there's a market for books about couples that like each other?
I'll try it. So that's our latest resource. It's something Pam and I have been doing throughout our marriage. Is we meet regularly to talk through our calendar and our finances and what are we going to do with our kids and what do we need to know is going on in each other's lives. And we mixed it together with the romantic side of our relationship because we knew if all we were having is a business meeting, we were going to get really bored with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we started off with prayer, and we started off with complimenting each other, and we end it with complimenting each other in prayer.
I love that.
Yeah,
I love that because sometimes I have devotion with my wife, and it ends in a debate. I think it's my fault, perhaps, but
Reed, it's always our fault. Yeah, that's why she chose it.
Wise advice for anyone that's listening. I was told from day one at my wedding, this is not your wedding, by the way. And I tell young guys that all the time. It's just, by the way, this wedding has nothing to do with it, just so you know.
Right.
So needless to say, yeah, a relationship expert, and even what would you say about in terms of your expertise in terms of sociology and social sciences? Because obviously that's what men are like waffles, women are like spaghetti. Really is all about. It's about the men thinking in kind of non-linear fashion, but men thinking in kind of compartmentalized fashion, and women thinking in integrated fashion.
Right.
So, what's your expertise with kind of that kind of stuff?
So it's both personal and professional. Like it started with when Pam and I got married. We are statistically the couple that shouldn't make it.
Yeah.
Because I grew up in a very troubled home. My mom struggles with mental illness, and I lived in a very isolated, abusive home. Pam grew up with the out of control alcoholic father, who, when he's not drinking, he's amazing. When he is drinking, he's violent and out of control.
Wow.
So when you look statistically, when we get together, we really should not be working as a couple. And we kind of had that sense. Like we got married young and we realized, we really don't know what we're doing.
Yeah, yeah.
We know we love Jesus. We know we love each other. And we know we don't have a clue.
Yeah.
So we started cornering couples that looked like they liked each other and asked them, like, what are you doing that's working? Why do you why do you hold hands and why do you smile when you look at each other? And like, is this even real?
Yeah.
Or are you putting up a front for us? And the ones who said, yeah, it's real, we said, well, how do you do it? And it turned into a lot of casual, very strategic conversations over lunch. And as we started to discover, there are skills you can learn that make marriage work, it became a passion of mine. So then when I went through pastoral training, I did all of my training in marriage and family relationships.
Okay.
And have been doing pastoral counseling now for about 30 years.
Right.
Helping couples. So as we worked with real couples, we started, sharing the stuff that real couples had shared with us. But then we began to realize there's certain issues that have to get lined up or the marriage just doesn't work.
Yeah.
And one of those issues was the male and female differences were actively interrupting relationships that wanted to work. So we started doing more and more research on what's really up with this.
Yeah.
Because it's easy to stereotype it and just, run with a few cliches and say, wow, we got something. So we started doing research, like what is actually happening between men and women. And then I discovered, the average couple doesn't take a very serious, focused approach to their relationship. They take a casual approach.
Yeah.
That we all wish that marriage was in the category of education or business, but it's not.
Right.
We tend to put it more in the it's on the hobby level. I have my hobbies. I go on vacation. I'm married.
Yeah. If it works, it's good. If it doesn't, then you try to do something, or unfortunately, the end result of divorce, which so many people choose. But yeah.
So I had two goals. I wanted, first of all, to be able to speak to people at a practical level, and I wanted it to be male friendly.
Yeah.
So I was just praying and
so you had to dumb it down a good bit.
Well, I'm going to say, I hate saying that. I like to say we put it in more strategic language.
Yeah. Yeah, which is what you just did right there. So I love that. So the thing this is almost something I was think we should save to the end, but you just said it, and I think it's a good opportunity to kind of jump into the larger conversation I want to have with you today, is that what your book is ultimately about is, yes, it's about gender differences, but really it's about appreciating the differences each of us have. Now, I would think in our present climate that a book like that would be welcomed, and of course it's 20 years old or so at this point in time, welcomed. But the more I think about the ideas that are presented in that book, which is really, even though it's 20 years old, I want to make that the basis of what we talk about today, because I want to look at how the book has aged and what the conversation around these ideas of gender differences has really solved. But before we get into the weeds with some of that, I just want to simply say that as I was thinking about this conversation with you, and I was thinking about the end result of your book, I thought to myself, this is the conversation we need to have today, appreciating our differences. Because what essentially is happening is nowadays our differences are driving us further apart, and they're becoming tools for us to kill each other with. And I'm being a little facetious there, but I think I mean kill each other in terms of like ideologically, axes to grind,
Yeah.
and then using those axes against people, and then
Yeah.
also social media and kind of some of the hate, and then maybe even on in a larger context, cancel culture and that kind of stuff. So our differences are no longer appreciated. We've isolated and segregated ourselves based upon who we are, and the person that has differences is that other person that we try to go after. So I think ultimately maybe even revisiting this book at this point in time really is helpful to us for that reason alone.
Well, I appreciate you bringing that up, Reed, because what I've noticed is if you don't know what to do with the differences, you will use them to create contention.
Mm.
So it happens at the marriage level, that if men and women don't know what to do with the differences, they then become critical of each other.
Yeah.
They get into a struggle of wills. I'm going to get you to be more like me. And as soon as you're more like me, we will get along.
Yeah. So like if you're different than me, it must be because there's something wrong with you.
Right. And when that doesn't work, then the frustration level rises. When the frustration level rises, everybody goes to their defenses. When those don't work, then they conclude this isn't working.
Yeah.
And then they go through all the pain of separation that lasts for generations to come.
Yeah.
And we're seeing the same thing happen at a societal level.
Yep.
You're different than me, so I'm going to change you. And when I can't change you, then I'm going to become even more defensive against you. And we're ramping it up and getting no results out of it.
Yeah.
So what we try to do at the personal level is let's help men and women discover the how.
Mm.
Because most people have the motivation. Like I've yet to meet somebody who's ever told me, if I have a mediocre or bad marriage, that's okay.
Yeah.
And I've certainly never met anybody that says, "Hey, look, I'm looking for somebody that I can argue with and be in contention with for the rest of my life. Can you help me find that person? Is there a dating service to help me find that person?"
No Tinder on that one, yeah.
And yet, that's a lot of people's reality.
Yeah.
So they have the motivation, they just don't know how.
Yeah.
And a lot of it is because it hasn't been modeled for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
But some of it too is just we're stubborn.
Yep.
And rather than learn different approaches, we just entrench, and we just say my way has to be best.
Yeah.
And then we push and push and push, and then we're just angry. And then if that doesn't work, we go talk to our friends.
Yeah. Yeah. So I had this conversation. I want to be as respectful as I can with this, but with my dad. My dad just recently passed away not too long ago. And I'll never forget this. He said, I think I might have asked him, like, my dad had been through a couple marriages and stuff, and said, "Are you going to remarry?" And he said, "Marriage just doesn't work for me, son." And I thought that was such an audacious claim, because I was like, so you're laying what you did at the foot of the institution of marriage rather than your own personal decision. But this is what we do. Is very often when we find either issues with ourselves or we find issues that aren't working, the last person in the world we want to look at is the man in the mirror. And I think on a societal level, that's what's happening. So this is why it's so important to talk with you. And I think it's so important for fellow Christians to enter into conversations and dialogue about this stuff,
agree.
and just people, period.
Yep.
But certainly fellow Christians, because when I almost wonder how much this is happening, at least in my experience, I'll say. So maybe it's totally subjective and not objective, but I think when Christians find sticky subjects, they avoid them at all costs, because you're building a church, you're building an Instagram platform, a Facebook platform, and the last thing you can afford to do is to alienate people who are the ones you're trying to reach, right? So there's a noble effort there, but the reality is also, but that can't be done at the expense of truth. And I really think in our culture today, we are sacrificing truth on the altar of sympathy. And we're doing that by and large in the church. And the reality is regardless if that's agreed with, the one thing I do know is that the truth is way more powerful than sympathy. And the truth is, whether it's because of postmodernism or what's coming on the heels of postmodernism. I just recently had a conversation with a guy about metamodernity, which is like the new philosophical ideology on its way in, supposedly. But anyway, whatever it is, there is no longer this understanding of the truth. We only have like my truth.
Yep.
And I think we need to, as Christians especially, kind of push back against that and just say, hey, there is still the truth. There is an objective truth outside of your experience, and we need to accentuate that, need to have a conversation about that. So the first thing I really kind of wanted to talk with you about is, since your book essentially is about gender differences, I want to talk to you about how you think the book has aged, because now the conversation is that there's not only no gender differences, there is no such thing as gender. Gender is a social construct.
Right.
And we want to talk about fact-based conversation in a second, but the truth is that like to even the idea that is so commonly accepted today that gender is a spectrum and not like a biological scientific reality is just kind of an odd thing for me. I'm wondering how it sits with you and how what the book has to say about some of these things that we're talking about in terms of gender studies and sex studies and our present conversation around these issues.
So the first thing I would say to you, well, first of all, before I go there, let me pose a question to you that I think is key today, and I don't really know what the answer is to it.
Okay.
Because we live in a day and age.
Well, you're asking the right person because I definitely do.
Okay. So we live in a day and age where information is flowing faster than anybody can keep up with it. And the picture I carry in my head of what the world is like today is everybody has in front of them a conveyor belt and information is moving on the conveyor belt. Mm-hmm. And there's too much coming at you to keep it all, so it falls off the edge.
Yeah.
And so it is quite possible for people to believe something today that they didn't believe 3 or 4 years ago because information has just kept rolling. So in that environment where information is always on the move, how do you pick out the information that's always true?
Yeah, that's a difficult one. This is gonna show you how like where my mind goes. Maybe how much of a like an old man stuck in a young man's body I am. Because when you said that, the one thing I kept on thinking about, and I don't remember her name, but it was that old black and white a TV actress where that conveyor belt.
It's Lucille Ball.
Lucille Ball with that chocolate, and she's just like shoving it down her shirt and shoving it in her mouth, trying to wrap it because it's going so fast she can't keep up with it.
Right.
Yeah. So I am an optimist, I swear.
Yeah.
Not a nihilist. But I think the answer is you don't. I think this is really why I believe Christians cannot afford to take the position of, well, just pray and preach the gospel alone, and not be Paul on Mars Hill and say, hey, we're talking to a post-Christian nation now, and we can't even talk about the gospel anymore because the gospel is totally not understood by people. Right. We have to start at a different base level line of reasoning, which is truth exists, and it's important to talk about the truth. But I guess the question is I don't think we are. I don't think we understand what truth even is anymore.
No, I agree.
And I think probably as cliche as this may sound, is I think the biggest example of this is what we're seeing in the news media. Is that stories don't any longer have to be true.
Right.
Like I was watching Stephen Glass. I don't know if you've ever seen that movie. Great. Or it's called Broken or Shattered Glass, I think. It's about Stephen Glass.
I'll have to. Okay.
But it's old. It's an older movie.
Okay.
It's like from the late 90s, early 2000s, something like that. But it's about a writer in a publication who habitually lied about every single one of his stories, but was so famous that that he didn't get caught until much later. Wow. And then when they did, they had this moral crisis of this guy, do we continue to allow him to do this or do we call him on his junk? And now I think Stephen Glass is just like, his story is just garbage because every editor in every newsroom in America has been like fired. I can only imagine. So again, all I'm saying is that like Christian, I don't want to keep on beating this drum because I think it's everybody. We all have an interest in the well-being of America. I'll say the well-being of our president, whatever. So all of us need to get behind the position of objective reality, because if we don't, I think we're going to keep on seeing the division, the mutually assured destruction that seems to be the philosophy of the day. If we don't, so my major concern ultimately is in pulpits in America. It's like if we're not even going to talk the truth there, then I don't know where we go.
It's a big challenge today, and people are going to have to wrestle with it. And where we traffic in that is, I actually would not put our book under the category of what today is called gender differences.
Okay.
Because what's happened in our society is they've successfully separated the biological reality from the discussion of gender.
Okay.
So people are even now saying, well, you have your biological sex, but then you have your gender on top of that.
Yeah, I know, but there are some people like Deborah So and such who are saying that is not a scientific way in which to view this discussion. You cannot separate gender and
well, I don't
sex
think you
in that
can.
way. Yeah,
But our book is really about how do you take these biological differences
Yeah.
and work them into your relationship?
Mhm.
Because the biological differences you can't argue with.
Uh-huh.
There's so much research behind
But
it.
would you agree that people are trying to argue
They're-
with those?
They're trying to, but they can't successfully do it.
Yeah, because the typical humanities paper, I heard Jordan Peterson say this, the typical humanities paper has maybe like one citation, and the research that you're talking about that you did for
Right.
this book, thousands and thousands and thousands of
Right.
hours. But it
Right.
doesn't seem that fact-based conversation about gender is important anymore.
Well, people are trying to not make it important.
Yeah.
And what happens to the discussion is when you're talking about it theoretically, you can go on and on and on. When you get down to ground level and you try to live it out, it comes apart.
Context of marriage, yeah.
Yeah, like I have had so many friends in my life who, when they were single, they would argue the point. And we would have long discussions about how can you say there's only two genders? How can you say everything comes down to male and female? And I would say, well, it's just what the research points out.
Yeah.
And they would argue the point, and then they got married. And they went, hey, can we talk? So down at ground level, people recognize there are differences here. So when people try to work out a marriage and really make it work,
Yeah.
not just live in denial or, you live your life, I'll live my life, we'll intersect every once in a while. If they're really trying to develop a relationship, they realize these differences are there.
For sure.
If you're raising children and you have a boy and a girl, you recognize the differences are there. And you didn't train them in. They came in with the package.
Yeah.
And it's affected by everything. So we want to make sure we don't go to the stereotypical. There's a stereotypical discussion about, well, men are better at mechanical things and women are better at emotional things.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Yeah.
That's a stereotype that doesn't hold.
Right.
But the biological differences that impact how we interact with life, those are real and they are our starting point, and then we mature from there.
Yeah, so there's some baseline biological realities
Yes.
that are scientifically based in research, and then there are some in some ways there is a spectrum in which we look at gender, but those are superficial realities and not the things that truly matter. Like, for instance, boys are better, boys are more aggressive. Boys like fighting. Girls are more prissy and like dolls and that kind of stuff. And so I think we would both agree that we've seen, even in the Christian world, some men who are a little bit more effeminate than other men, or women who are a little bit more masculine than other women. And
Well, let me just give you one. It's a fun one to talk about, because the levels of testosterone and estrogen in your body affect the way that you process life.
right.
So
So there's a prenatal kind of nature.
well, for instance, studies show that women tend to hear crying babies better than men do. Except if you have a situation where androgen levels are higher in a female, she doesn't hear the baby cry either. So we can't say all males have this level of testosterone in their body and all women have this level of estrogen in their body, because that's a continuum.
Yeah.
We all have a mixture of those. So depending on where the mixture is determines how you process some things in life.
Yeah.
We need to make room for that in our discussion, because that's
sure.
a practical reality. But it's getting harder to enter that information in. So I think we're now at a point where Francis Schaeffer used to say that when you are talking with people who are only dealing with information, you have to be willing to go to the point of despair. Because what happens with philosophies, they sound really good until you get to the end of them.
Yeah.
And some of these philosophies we're talking about today, they don't have enough substance to hold forever.
Yeah.
And courageously, what we need to do is help people move to the point where they realize, yeah, I kind of believe in nothing.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a hard place to take people if you care about people.
Right.
And we often try to do it with a sledgehammer rather than with a relationship. But if you're willing to ask people questions and stay curious until they get to the point where they realize, yeah, what I believe is not really based on anything, but I'm going to hold on to it anyway.
Yeah, I think that's I want to maybe push back against that just a little bit. How could you? Because that's so right, 100%. But
it's
I'm wondering,
messy.
I'm wondering how much of pushing through Because the reality is that there's an activist contingent that wants to have these conversations, but does not want to have fact-based conversations. Right. What they want to do is they want to yell at you on social media, say you're being hateful towards transgender people, LGBT community, just because you have the conversation. Like, I can give you a perfect example. I made a comment about the fact that we have to be careful that we're not allowing crisis to be used as a political tool. I made a video about that and used that some of this police stuff, while anybody would decry what Derek Chauvin did, and I've talked to multiple police officers and said, this is way too long. What that guy did was abuse. And anytime anybody dies, under any circumstance, our heart should be pricked a little. But jumping on the statistical realities of police shootings against unarmed black men and stuff like that doesn't really give a basis for the conversation we're having about this much broader systemic racism in police forces. Just doesn't. And so I was trying to make those points, and then somebody commented on that and said, so you don't think there's such a thing as a racist cop? And I'm like, that conversation has nothing to do with what I just said. Yes, there are racist cops. Yes, there's racist everybody. Yes, racism exists. And so I'm wondering, too, how much of that we have to, like, this activist contingent, this non-fact-based conversation we have to address in order to finally get to the place where we can talk about the end reality of emotional conversations that are happening so much right now.
So I'm going to give you my view of this whole thing. Is I think every person has to, first of all, decide what level do you want to have this conversation at? Because, as you said, there's an activist level that's very contentious, and some people love that level. Like, some people are fighters. They love the debate. They can stand and they can proclaim, and they love that level. And there are examples in the Bible of people who are like that. Like, John the Baptist was one of those guys. Yeah. Like, he didn't take a soft approach. He wasn't the gentle, I'm going to try to reach your heart. He was just like, this is what's true, and he didn't really concern himself with the cost. So that's one level we can have this conversation at, and everybody has to ask, am I willing to pay the price to have the conversation at that level? Right. Most people are going to say no, honestly, because most people are not fighters. They're not contenders.
And let's be honest, there's a social cost for the conversation.
There is. And so if you're willing to make that cost and you can handle it at that level, I say jump in and take the stand, but don't be surprised if people push back on you. Because the people are not looking for answers today. They're just looking for wins. Yeah. Okay. Now, the other level is a very personal level, that you care about people and you don't want them to base their lives on things that are not true. That's a very different level of conversation. And I would say the key to that level is curiosity. That we need to be good at asking questions, not making comments. Because people really are struggling with this. But they're not asking all of the questions they should be asking. And there are some obvious questions we can ask that we don't have to be contentious about, we don't have to be difficult about, but they matter. So the people who are really upset about what we see happening in our culture, one of the questions we should be asking is, so Reed, what is a realistic solution we can talk about? That if that's wrong, what should we be doing instead? And I really would love to hear your input on it. And if you stay curious, not like, well, you don't have an answer. Now we're just back into a big fight that's not getting the average person anywhere. But if we honestly ask the question, and if we honestly ask questions like, okay, so if we're not supposed to say we're male and female, what are we supposed to say? And wait for the answer. Because, again, if we really are curious about what other people think, it will frustrate us because we're going to find out people don't have a lot of answers. They have a lot of emotion and they have a lot of energy, but they don't have a lot of answers.
I was talking with my kids about this today, my students, I should say, who I consider my kids. I love them dearly, but I was talking with the students about this today, about not to keep on bringing this back up, but just to kind of circle back to this as an example. I was talking to them about why the only answers we have for police brutality are deconstructionist, but we don't have any constructionist answers.
Exactly.
And maybe I'm wrong about that, and I'm just not aware. But I've got to be honest. In the public conversation, I've heard zero constructive answers on how we're actually going to solve the answer or solve the problem of police brutality and systemic racism in police forces. If we're going to have that conversation, but yeah. So I think ultimately, yes, this is where obviously, as a man in good conscience, I cannot and would not disagree with the ultimate answer of, one, we need to be endlessly curious and we need to have discussions. But I am concerned somewhat with the fact that the activist contingent is doing their best and a good job of it, of just saying we will not have conversations where people disagree. However, I also know at the end of the day that we need to not only be endlessly curious, but we also need to provide whatever answers we can to these issues, because I also am a little bit concerned, especially with people my age and much younger, that there is a hopelessness and a despair and a lack of optimism in this generation. And by the way, I don't know if you can speak to this, but there is that among especially transgender young girls. And transitioning is not helping that. The level of depression, suicide, anxiety, and all that stuff is in many cases only getting higher after girls transition, because they find out that it's not really the answer that they were looking for. And I think even among the LGBT community, like, we need to have open conversations about that and be okay with suggesting these statistics without thinking that we're trying to take away what your identity is or your sexuality or anything like that. We're just trying to have these honest and open conversations about these realities that deserve to have some solutions provided for them.
So, I think the answer to this, Reed, is helping people discover their value. Like, I actually am shocked at how many people because I coach people on a regular basis.
Right.
One of the questions I always ask them is, hey, now that we've got to know each other a little bit, I want to ask you the question, what are you exceptionally good at in your life? And people look at me like I spoke to them in a foreign language.
Wow.
That we've not given people permission to think that way. I also think that our parenting over the last 20 years, we've been so self-focused, we forgot to tell our kids, hey, before you go very far, let me point out to you, do you realize you are really good at this? And I don't know if we're afraid people are going to get proud, if we're afraid that they're going to get narcissistic, but the average person has no idea what they're really good at.
Well, I think, I just want to interject this real quick. I think our culture has moved away from Christianity, and I think we moved away from virtue. I asked my students the other day, too, if they looked up to anybody, and almost every one of them said no.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
And so if there's a void of I don't know what I'm good at, I'm going to look for it. And we look for it in all kinds of crazy ways and all kinds of positive ways.
But they're also finding that there's not really anybody that they can look up to in terms of virtue and in terms of goodness in our society today. That says something to me about what's going on.
Well, and I don't think it's going to happen at when I was growing up, we would look at public figures that way.
Yeah, me too.
I don't think we do that anymore. Yeah, I don't think we do that anymore.
Yeah.
What we're looking at is, who are the people that care about me? Now, that's still powerful.
That is powerful, yeah.
And so if we're going to turn this, it's going to be because an army of people start speaking into people's lives. Like all of this transitional surgery, all of this trying to figure out who I am, all of this trying to find a label that fits who I am. It's all about, I'm trying to figure out who I am.
Yeah, it's identity, yeah.
And when they start to realize, you know what, you actually are a remarkable person. And if you can't see it, let me point it out to you.
Yeah.
And once they start to embrace that, suddenly all the information they have starts to matter. But if I don't know who I am, and if I can go farther with that, a lot of people think they're rejects.
Yeah, they don't matter.
That they've been abandoned by important people in their life. They've been overly criticized. They've been abused. And now they're trying to figure out, who am I? And that's where, if we're willing to get involved with people's lives, it's going to be messy. And it's going to take a lot of us doing it, because you can't do this work with very many people. So it's going to take a lot of us. And when we start asking questions like, so why do you think God made you as a male? Why do you think God made you as a female? What are the gifts he gave you? What are the gifts he withheld from you? And why do you think he did that? And how do we maximize who you are, not who you think you're supposed to be?
Yeah.
That kind of work ignites people and gets them thinking clearly. But we have created a society where everybody feels deficient. So I can post on social media, look how good my life, look at how good this is, look how good that is, which says, oh, you don't have that? Oh, I'm sorry. And then we've taken people with great personality and we're magnifying them. And the people who have difficulty with words or not quite as winsome, they're now feeling like, yeah, I don't matter as much and I don't really have much to offer. And we are beating people down as we're progressing.
Yeah.
And then add to that the onslaught of technology. Everything you get that's new is old very quickly.
Yeah.
And the implication is everything's temporary, everything's transient, including you.
That's interesting, yeah.
And we're just driving people into this hole where they can't figure out who they are.
Yeah, I think, by the way, too, keep on going on that if you have more to say about that. But I just want to say, in terms of social media, too, we could go down a rabbit trail of social engineering and social media, too. But so we won't do that. But I do think that the cultural machination, the cultural reality of likes and not likes, too, is probably fueling a little bit of this identity stuff, too, in terms of, like, if I don't get likes, then I am not liked. Exactly. People are making this. Social media has now become existential.
Yeah, and it has become such a like it's a freight train.
Yeah,
it is moving so fast, picking people up so quickly, and the average person doesn't know what to do except go along with it. Mm-hmm. And then we create the crisis. Like I managed through a series of events. I managed to get blackballed on one of my Facebook accounts. So the question is, like, do I matter anymore?
Can I ask you why?
Well, yes, it's actually a big run. So one of my email accounts got hacked.
Okay.
They used that email account to take over my personal Facebook page. And then they used my Facebook page to get to our business page. They changed it from a relationship page to a weapons page.
Okay.
And then we finally got the thing recovered, but because it now is a shift from weapons back to relationships, it's confusing to the audience. Mm-hmm. So my name got tagged as somebody who was confusing the audience. And so I started a new Facebook page to kind of get restarted again.
That's
that
crazy.
one got labeled immediately and got shut down.
Wow.
So I actually can't start a page right now.
That's insane.
Yeah. And it's all because of what they called confusing the audience. Uh-huh. So the bottom line is that I just didn't play the game the way the game's supposed to be played.
Well, yeah. It's a little bit unsettling, too, that confusing the audience now is in the eyes of Facebook.
Well, and it wasn't confusing when it went from relationships to weapons, but it's confusing when it went from weapons to relationships.
Yeah.
And again, it's all just a big control thing.
Yeah.
You know, we thought it was all a free speech platform,
yeah,
which is why we all jumped on. And it turns out it's really not a free speech platform. Yeah. It's an engineered platform.
By the way, did you know that Apple is going to release an update where now you can decide whether or not you're going to allow your information to be data mined?
Yes.
That's that. Like, who's going to say, yeah, take all my personal information.
Right.
It's yours.
Right.
So I don't know what that does to social media either.
Well, it's one of those things that we're running with that we all thought it was going to be safe.
Yeah.
And now we're realizing we live in a world that's not safe. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the reasons why we have to keep having these discussions is it's not a safe world. Mm-hmm. That when we have all of these conversations, there's an agenda and a manipulation involved in everything.
Right.
That this whole gender discussion, it's not just about finding the truth. It's about pushing an agenda.
Right.
Because we used to be able to have this discussion at a moral level. Mm-hmm. Like when I got started in my career, we were talking about all these same issues. They were just a moral discussion. Mm-hmm. Like what stand should we take? How should we interact with people who take a different moral stand than we do?
Yeah.
How do we deal with the implication down the road when it starts to affect families, not just individuals?
Right.
And we could talk about all that. Because there wasn't a societal political agenda attached to it. It really was a moral discussion. It was on the same level of should somebody who's married have affairs?
Yeah.
Is it okay to have sex outside of marriage? Is it okay to have an open marriage? Like we were talking about all those things, and homosexuality and transgender studies, all of that was in the same moral discussion.
Right.
But then it got said enough that it got pushed now to, oh, no, this is a fact. Uh-huh. That it's no longer a discussion. So now if you disagree with it at a moral level, you're like the flat earth people.
Yeah.
And it's intimidation. It's not an honest discussion anymore. It's people who don't believe the way the party line is are now trying to be humiliated into giving up what they believe.
Yeah, and I would just say this, just for the sake of anybody watching who has stuck with us this long. If your immediate response to a conversation is an accusation, then you're not listening, and you're not interested in actually having a conversation.
Yeah.
Rather than it should be a question,
Yeah.
right? Questions of clarification, questions of detail, and all that kind of stuff, rather than an accusation.
Well, I think these are all discussions we ought to be having, and we need to train the average person on how to have it at a personal level, because the average person is not a political activist.
Right.
There are certainly people who should be doing that, but for the average person who wants to talk to their neighbor, the key to this whole thing is first of all, it's never loving to deceive people. So it's worth telling the truth.
Right.
But when you're at a personal level, being interested in the person rather than trying to win the argument is always going to be more effective.
Yeah.
Because at the end of the day, we're trying to help them see that God loves them, God cares about them, but they're not going to see it until their heart turns.
Yeah.
So we just need to hang around and have the conversation until their heart turns. Once their heart turns, you can say all the things that you want to say, and they will go, oh, yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yep.
But until the heart turns, our goal needs to be, I need to have a relationship with you. I need to be humble enough to actually listen to what you have to say. I need to take the risk that what you have to say might influence me.
I might be wrong.
Or I might be vulnerable.
Yeah.
That's one of the reasons why people don't engage is they're like, I don't want to hear anything but what I believe because if I hear anything else, I might change what I believe. I don't want to change what I believe, and I'm scared to believe anything except what I believe right now.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of insecurity that we carry around.
Yeah.
And we need to be humble enough to say, I actually am willing to hear what you have to say, knowing that I might think you're smarter than me. It might throw me into a crisis where I have to think through what I believe.
Yeah.
But it's worth having the conversation because it causes growth in everybody's life. And there is also a danger that when you talk to people and you ask them what they believe, they might find out that what they believe is not solid. And it might throw them into crisis.
Yeah.
And you might be the person in their life that creates that disequilibrium, and they might blame you for it.
Yeah. Yeah. We need to, I would definitely say we need and maybe this is just like never going to happen, but maybe it's idealistic and naive. We need to create this sense of difficulty is okay.
Difficulty's good.
I almost wonder too if Christianity can help us with that, because I don't want to turn this into like a pulpit or anything, but like or a dissertation. But the one thing, Marxism is on the rise in our nation, I think, is kind of an objectively true thing, even if it's not. The one thing that is true about Marxism is that Marx hated Christianity and probably maybe Christians too, and called it the opiate of the masses because he felt like Christians' teaching on suffering was antithetical to revolution. That if you have a capacity to put up with suffering, then you're not going to fight back, and it would turn you almost into a pacifist. And I think he's misunderstanding Christian suffering, but the reality is that he's pinpointing something that is fundamentally important about Christianity, is that it is reliant upon difficulty to help you see the end of yourself, to help you see your own personal limitations, and to see your need for God. And the Creator, we try to create safe spaces around people, quit having conversations, give way to the activist conversations that are happening outside of fact-based conversations. What we're doing is we're actually helping people get further and further and further away from a self-identifying moment that could actually truly help people. Yeah. This is the only reason why I say, it's not because I'm a jerk, and maybe I am, but it's the only reason I say that the truth is more powerful than sympathy. And I'm not even trying to say that they're counter to each other, because sympathy can be truthful. But what I am just trying to say is that if we're willing to have sympathy at the expense of truth, then what we're actually robbing people of is the opportunity to, for self-discovery, and more importantly, so epiphany and divine revelation, I think.
Well, I would even go so far as to say sympathy without truth is not actually sympathy. Like if I tell you, hey, Reed, I know you're really committed to driving on the other side of the road.
Yeah.
And I just want you to know I support you in your decision. I'm not being sympathetic to you. I'm writing your death sentence.
Yeah.
Because you're going to get in a massive accident and your life's going to be over, or you're going to be maimed for life. That's not sympathy. That's bailing out on the real conversation. Sympathy says I care enough about you that I want you to think about the truth.
Yeah.
So I'm willing to dialogue on the hard questions, but I'm not going to tell you you're an idiot or you're wrong or you are somehow from a different planet because you don't think exactly the way I do.
Right.
I'm just going to get you and I to interact on the truth.
I love that. Yeah.
And so if I ask you questions like, so what do you do with the fact that there are some diseases only men can get because their biology is different? What do you, like, how do you process that? And how do you process the fact that the part of the brain that monitors verbal interaction is larger in females than males? What do you do with that? And we have honest conversations about real things, and we just see if people can grasp it.
Yeah.
Because to withhold the truth is not loving and it's not caring. And it's one of the reasons why we wrote the book that we did, and I think the reason why it's been popular, like it's not only, you know, you mentioned how many copies it's sold here, but it's also been translated into 12 languages.
Oh wow, yeah.
And it's only because it resonates with people.
Yeah.
People realize when I try to talk to my wife, the response I get back is a lot different than the response I get from my guy friends. What do I do with that? And our goal is to help you succeed at it, not be mad about it or not be critical about it or not say, well, either you or me need to change.
Yeah.
Because this is unacceptable.
Yeah, or just to lament the fact, like,
Right.
oh, this is the way my marriage is going to be, I guess.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think we see it. You know, you mentioned Christianity might help. I actually think we see Jesus operate at two levels. Because there are some people he is remarkably compassionate with who are in very difficult circumstances.
Yes, it's good, yeah.
You know, like so he approaches the lady who's caught in adultery, and in that society, she's about to lose her life.
Yep.
And Jesus' response to her is, first of all, look at the crowd and say, well, you know what? Okay, I understand you guys want to carry out your social mandate. So any of you that haven't sinned, feel free. Just start hurling rocks at her. And then he just like ignored them to see what they would do. And then he responds to her with compassion.
Yeah.
But it's not the kind of compassion that says, well, you know, just carry on, you're fine. He challenges her to live, you know, okay, hey, now that we've spared your life, why don't you not go through this again? Let's rise to a new level. But then when he talks to the stubborn leaders of his day, he's an activist.
Yeah.
He challenges them on what they're teaching and where he's leading the people. So we see him operating at both levels.
Yeah.
And I think all of us have to choose. At times, I think we have to rise to both levels. But for the most part, I think we have different roles. I just think God puts prophets in the world, and he puts shepherds.
This is where we have a problem in the Christian world, I think, because we have such a very narrow, myopic view of what Christians and Christianity should look like.
Yeah.
I mentioned to you before we started rolling that I had Sam Childers on the podcast. The reason I love Sam is that Sam pushes against the average notion of what Christians look like, the mild-mannered, the mealy-mouthed, just very meek and mild, don't do anything to ruffle anybody's feathers. And then you got Sam Childers, who is actively fighting against the LRA to save children. And you're like, well, I don't like the optics of a Christian with a machine gun and the machine gun preacher. But you also have to admit, if your child was in trouble, what would you do?
Absolutely.
So
Absolutely.
So I think that, so even that in terms of, because I'll be fair just to say, I think Christianity, post-Christian nation is causing a lot of our moaning and groaning and heartache. But I also think that Christians also need to be mindful of the things that we need to expand upon, if I can paint with a broad brush and just say that perhaps we could use with a broadening of our definition of what it truly means to be a Christian, not in the gospel sense, not in the universalistic sense, which so many are doing, but in the sense of our mannerisms, the way we treat conversations and the way we treat people as individuals, rather than just kind of a broad-based way of dealing with people. Because Jesus says, speak the truth in love. Now, I'm a theologian. I got a master's degree in theology. There's obviously way more smarter than people than me, but I know the Bible pretty well.
Yeah.
I don't know how to do that sometimes. I don't know how to toe the balance of some people you save by the fire of hell, like Paul was talking about, and some people you save with love.
Great.
But we have to make room for all of that, I think, in these conversations if we're going to have them.
Right, and along with your point, we need to never sacrifice truth.
Yeah.
Because the truth sets people free.
Yeah.
And so anytime we're sacrificing the truth for the sake of getting along, we're not helping people.
Right.
And
and you already mentioned that with that analogy. It was a perfect analogy.
Yeah. And so I think, in fact, I remember the first time, not the first time, I remember when I got tired of people saying to me, hey, Jesus is just a crutch for people who are weak. I finally had heard it too many times. And the person that said it to me, I looked at him and said, so you've never really met Jesus, have you? And he went, what do you mean? I said, if you met the real Jesus, you'd never say that. Now, if you had told me That, hey, if you want to have a life that's moving faster than you ever thought about moving, if you want to go places you never thought about going before, and if you want to tackle challenges that you would have not like faced on your own, and you want to live an exciting, fast-paced, daring life, then give your heart to Jesus.
Yeah.
Because he's moving faster than I would move. He's taken me places I would have never gone on my own. He's given me courage to speak out that I would never have on my own. Now, if you talked about that kind of Jesus, I would have said you knew him.
Mm-hmm.
But this crutch thing for weak people, that's not the people I know that know Jesus would never describe it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, not even believers. I mean, just look at him.
Yeah, because he's a force.
Yeah.
He's not this mealy-mouthed, afraid of reality kind of person. He is a force.
Mm-hmm.
And when he enters your life, he brings all of that challenge and all of that strength with him, and he challenges you to keep up with him.
Yeah.
And if you won't keep up, he doesn't force you to go faster than you want to go, but he'll take you faster than you want to if you're willing.
Yeah.
So
much of this conversation just maybe for the Christian, but we know for everybody, because that's what our faith tells us, is that Christ is not just for the Christian. Christ is for the world. For God so loved the world. Yeah. Is a return to biblical truth. If like we didn't have these like versions of Jesus, right? We could come to a greater understanding of the way the world works and how we should potentially broach these conversations, but more importantly, just how we should live our life. Right.
Can I give you one more analogy?
Sure.
Because I think the Bible talks about there's a broad road that leads to destruction, and many are those who follow it, and there's a narrow road that leads to life, and few are the ones that choose it.
Right.
And I think most of us have this picture of that road, that they're two parallel roads running together, and they kind of go in different directions. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's the right picture. That the picture I think we should be carrying is the broad road is heading in one direction, and the narrow road runs right in the middle of it, going the opposite way.
Yeah. Because
the cross is behind. Yeah. The direction that the world's going.
Yeah.
So when you decide to get on the narrow road, and you're actually walking cross-culturally, and people are constantly telling you you're going the wrong way. Hey, turn around and join us. You're going the wrong way. And if we're going to walk the narrow road, we have to be willing to just keep marching cross-culturally and saying, look, I love you guys, but this is what's true.
Right.
And I would love for you to join me, but I'm going to stick to what's true. Mm-hmm. Because once you turn, you see, oh, that's what's true. And so as we're walking, we have to be patient with people, because they really think they're going the right way.
Right.
And it's difficult to step on the narrow road and go the other direction. But as you go, you have this confidence and this ability to stand. And what we really need to do is I believe we're in a day where we just need to stand. Mm-hmm. We need to be willing to proclaim what's true, hold to it very calmly, and wait for people's hearts to turn.
Yeah.
Because once their hearts turn, they believe the truth and they walk with us. But until then, it looks to them like we are going the wrong way.
Right. That's powerful, yeah.
And we just need to hang in there. Keep marching. Yeah.
You might have just answered my very last question for you, but and it won't be anticlimactic if you say I just answered that. But I don't want to have this conversation and not bring this up. You're a relationship expert. The one thing that I find that is really causing, maybe not tension within a couple, but causing some anxiety and stuff for couples is, since we were on the conversation of gender differences and stuff today, there's a lot of the rise of the non-heterosexual lifestyle is increasing. Right. Baby boomers was, according to a Gallup poll, was only like 2%, and from millennial to Gen Z, it doubled. Like just in that one generation turn, it doubled from like around like 9% or something like that to 16%. And so I'm finding a lot of couples who either don't know how to talk to their transgender kid, or couples that are dealing with this together. So do you have any advice, any thoughts, since you deal with couples a lot, about that specific scenario and the anxiety that can bring into a marriage, or even how to speak to their kids who may be battling with their identity and maybe identifying as transgender, and the kind of sorrow that can be associated with that for couples?
Yeah, so the first thing I would say to everybody listening is we need to start the conversation about the sexual reality of life earlier with our kids than ever before.
Okay.
That we should start talking about...
What age? Do you have an age, or...
Well, we should start talking about their biology when they're 3 and 4 years old. And we should start talking about the differences between boys and girls by the time they're entering into school.
Okay.
That should be a normal part of our conversation.
Thanks. I feel like a horrible parent now.
We should not be afraid of talking about genitals. We should not be talking about, I'm afraid about talking about the different responses that boys and girls have.
Okay.
We shouldn't be afraid of pointing out the unique differences between each of the kids that we have. Like I raised 3 sons. I've now got 3 daughter-in-laws and 5 grandkids, 3 of which are female. So I would not tell you, oh, all the girls are like this and all the boys are like this. I would say all the males are obviously males, the females are obviously females, and every one of them is individually different.
Yeah.
So we work with each of them as individuals, and we point out all of the strengths that we see in their lives in a very, very overt way, because our kids are bombarded today. Your kids face so many messages on a regular basis. They just get bombarded with information.
Yeah.
But studies show the most influential people in our kids' lives are their parents, if the parents take the influence. So I would start really early talking about biology. Then as they go into school, I would start talking to them about, okay, this is what our family stands for. This is what our family is about. You're going to meet other families who believe differently. And as you hear those things, we need to dialogue on a regular basis. So like with our kids, we had dinner conversations. Hey, so what did you hear today? What words were you hearing? What questions were you asked? And we dialogue about those things really early on before the hormonal thing kicks into high gear and it gets to be a very difficult conversation.
Yeah.
Then,
by the way, I this is very good, by the way, and it's feeding me. But it does make me think of Arnold Schwarzenegger's Kindergarten Cop, where that boy stands up and says, "Boys have penises, girls have vaginas." So obviously his parents were doing that with him. But of course our culture says that movie should be canceled now because that's not true anymore. But anyway, I can't help but think about that scene. But anyway, keep going.
Right. And then I would encourage every family to do what we did, not because we did it, but because I think it's so strategic today, is we had our kids right before puberty start writing relationship contracts. So what is a friend? What is a romantic interest? When can you call somebody your girlfriend or your boyfriend? How are the parents of the other people involved in the discussion? Because it forces our kids now to think through all of these issues they're going to get bombarded with. Mm-hmm. And then if they start making choices that you are uncomfortable with, or this is a road that's going to be very painful for them, my advice to parents is you dive in. You don't get critical of them. You don't tell them there's no way in my lifetime you're going to do that. You get really personal with them, and you draw out of them what's causing it. Mm-hmm. Because we live in a complex world, and we don't, like, none of us get a biological readout of our kids. Like how much of this hormone do they have? How much of this chemical do they have? None of us get that. Right. So we have to discover that as we go. And then we don't know every response they've had to every circumstance they've gone through. And everybody perceives some things as traumatic that other people think are trivial. Yeah. And if there's a major change being considered in a kid's life, something happened. Somebody got a hold of them. Somebody talked to them. They felt something at some point based on an experience that they had that they're probably not telling us yet. Right. And if we can dig in and find out what is it,
yeah, that's super good.
then we can actually have a discussion that has a solution. Yeah. But if it's just a battle of the wills, when you have somebody who's scared fighting with somebody who's wounded, there's seldom a solution that comes out of that.
Wow, that's really good. Yeah.
So we have scared parents, wounded kids, and they're not getting anywhere.
Yeah, yeah. To me, that's so profound and so good because what some people may not realize if they don't come from a Christian worldview, hearing you say that is what Christians really struggle with. And even if they're not Christians, they wouldn't suggest that they do struggle with this because they just don't understand Christianity. But Christians as a whole, and I think Christian parents specifically who have kids who are struggling with their identity like this, their sexual identity, their major concern, number one thing on their list is making sure that their kids don't feel like their parents are judging them or hateful toward them or anything like that. That is a Christian parent's biggest fear of not showing their kid compassion in this instance. So I've seen almost every single parent in this instance. I haven't seen a single one, to be honest with you, that said, not in my house or anything like that. They're almost immediately, their gut reaction, because Christians have been so castigated with the accusation that we're not loving to the LGBT community, that that's the first thing on their list.
Right.
And so I think to make sure that you are compassionate and caring and loving to your child, but to not let that make you so scared of having the conversation with them that you don't broach the conversation at all. Because I think that's what a lot of parents end up doing, is that they're so concerned with their kid tuning them out because, oh, that's your Christianity talking now, that they don't actually enter into a substantive conversation about the changes and the decisions that they're making.
And again, I know we always get pushback on this, but somebody who's getting ready to make a major change in their life. Like, we're not talking about, hey, what hair color would you like to have next week?
Right.
Like, we're talking a major change. There has to be some trauma behind that.
Mm.
And I don't think we realize how traumatized most people are today because of the flood of information and what's the right word to use? Like outlandish stuff that they see. Like when you and I were dealing with pornography as teenagers, it was kind of out there.
Yeah. It was in paper form to begin with for me, which is weird for people, right? Because the internet was around.
And pornography today is an assault.
Mm-hmm.
And not only is it prevalent, but the level of pornography. And when you think about how many young kids are being exposed to pornographic kind of images, they get traumatized by that. They don't know what to do with that.
Yeah.
Like it's hard enough to walk in when your parents are engaging in sex and going, what are my parents doing?
Yeah.
When you see total strangers doing things that are highly abusive, and now that's seared in your brain, you're going to react somehow. Mm-hmm. But you're not going to go to your mom and dad and say, hey, mom and dad, I need to tell you what I saw today, and it was really hard for me to, how am I supposed to respond to it?
Yeah, almost never.
They're just weirded out by it.
Mm-hmm.
So we have to assume that there's trauma going on in almost every young person today, but we don't label it that.
Mm-hmm.
And we're making the situation worse by saying, you guys are just old-fashioned, and they're free and easy, and they handle information better than you do, blah, 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 blah. Mm-hmm. And what's really happened is they're wounded people walking around trying to figure out, what do I do with this? And many of them are considering doing a major change in their life without even ever talking about what caused the trauma. Mm-hmm. And again, I'm not naive. I know that people are capable of anything, and I know no matter what we do and no matter how much we talk about this, some people will make decisions that we disagree with.
Sure.
And what we do with that as a societal level is something we're going to be talking about for a long time. Mm-hmm. Because the society is trying to figure itself out and will always be trying to figure itself out. What I also know is that when you talk to people at the level of where their heart's at, they tend to respond. Because we all want to be connected. We all want to have people in our life that care about us. And we're all trying to get to a place where we have a sense of peace in our life.
Yeah. And
it's an elusive thing. And the worse your decisions are, the harder that peace is to find. Mm-hmm. And it's one of the reasons why Jesus gave his life for us, is he wanted us to find that peace that we could live with not only here on this earth, but forever. Mm-hmm. But the world is not necessarily applauding that decision.
Yeah, no doubt. So I think the moral of the story at the end of the day is, regardless of the context and what conversation, let's have the conversation. Let's do it from a compassionate and curious perspective, with fact-based and truth-based desires. And push past the difficulty of those conversations, and not let the difficulty keep us from developing a spine and actually having the conversation with people. Because if we will do that, we will do ourselves a favor and them a favor. And the greater, I would just say this, I guess, at the end of the day, is that familiarity, they say, breeds contempt. But I know this: the more you know, the less you know people, the less you understand them. Yeah. And the less communication you have with them, the more you can alienate them from your life. And you can assume bad intent and impure motives and all that kind of stuff if you keep them at arm's length. And so much of what's happening in conversations today is just that attempt. I don't want you close, because then we may actually have to talk about this. And I cannot move in my position and so forth. So let's have the conversation.
Well, and the reason why I push curiosity so much is I think it's the thing everybody can do. Like, not everybody can debate well.
Yeah.
And a lot of people get flustered when things get heated.
Yeah.
But I think everybody has the ability to be curious.
Yeah.
And you may not know what to do with the answers you hear, but curiosity draws people to you. And who knows what will happen at that point.
Yeah, I would say that's true of me. My bank loans, student loans tell me that I'm educated, but really I don't know how much. I just know I want to be endlessly curious, and I want to pursue knowledge, and I want to learn more. So yeah.
And if we have the courage to ask the hard questions in a winsome way, I think we'll be amazed at our effectiveness.
Yeah, I agree so much. Well, Bill, thank you so much for being here. How can people follow you or check you out online and even support what you're doing?
So our website is love-wise.com.
Mm-hmm.
Our goal is to connect love and wisdom, because we believe where wisdom and love meet, relationships flourish.
Awesome.
So love-wise.com. If you forget all that, if you Google waffles and spaghetti, I don't think anybody else is putting those two together.
Mm-hmm.
So you can find us that way.
It's kind of like weapons and relationship.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the best way to keep in touch with us. We also are, of course, are on Amazon, and so that's the best way to keep up with us. And there's ways to support us on the website that you can find.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yep. So I'll put a link down in the show notes for the
Okay.
website, and then
Thank
I'll
you.
also put a link down to the store where they can check out the over 35 books that you've written. So
Hey, we're actually up to 50 now, so we got to update
Wow,
our bio.
okay.
Yeah, it's cool. So anyway, Reed, thanks for kind of holding the torch here, and thanks for letting me be a part of it. And I hope you never get tired of keeping people talking.
amen. Well, thank you so much, and I absolutely enjoyed it.
Thanks.
All right. Bye-bye, everybody.
Our thanks again to our guests for being on the show today. Indie Thinker with Reed Uberman was brought to you by our sponsors. If you like what you heard today, please do us a big favor and give it a 5-star review and like it and share it with friends. And if you want to hear more awesome guests, make sure to check out past episodes. Indie Thinker is a nonprofit paid for by our sponsors and the generous gifts of people like you. In order to hear more great guests like you did today, please consider giving a tax-deductible gift by going to indiethinker.org. And just remember, your voice matters, but infinitely more when you think for yourself.